Hi, welcome to Filmaginations, a podcast about your favorite TV series and films. Every few weeks, I will cover a different one and take a deep dive into what happens on the screen and what my favorite moments are.
Today, I'm going to discuss a film, My Policeman. Same as fellow travelers, this piece is based on a novel of the same name, written by Bethan Roberts. Movie was directed by Michael Grandage and premiered in 2022. Story of Tom, Patrick and Marion from the 1950s is portrayed by Harry Styles, David Dawson and Emma Corrin, whereas the same characters 40 years later are represented by Linus Roche, Rupert Everett and Gina McKee. Interestingly, Ron Niswainer was a writer and Linus was an actor for both My Policeman and Fellow Travelers, a piece I covered 2 weeks ago. We follow the lives of 3 people who inevitably destroy each other throughout the years. Marion is smitten with Tom and tries to spend time with him, hoping one day he'll finally desire to be with her and eventually marry her. At the same time, Tom is exploring his attraction to another man, Patrick, a museum curator. During Patrick and Tom's first meetings, you can tell the latter was slowly but curiously exploring his attraction to another man. There is a lot of tension between them. They look at each other with admiration. Tom always lived in his bubble, in his town, Brighton, and knew nothing more than that. Patrick opened his eyes to so many things. He talks about his travels. He shares his knowledge about art. He is essentially feeding Tom's curiosity. So when he invites Tom to his apartment, he gets a positive response. However, later Tom contemplates going as he sits by the Brighton's pier and smokes a cigarette. I like Patrick's place very much. It's nicely done and cozy, with the books, art and couches. You can feel his soul there. I appreciate the close-ups to Tom's body and face when Patrick is painting him. It seemed like we were looking at him through Patrick's eyes, focusing on each area for a second to be able to draw it. Sometime later, we see Patrick and Tom getting intimate for the first time. Tom dares to touch Patrick, and then is unsure whether they should do anything at all. Patrick takes control then, and it seems like he was just waiting for Tom to make the first move. He's done talking. He starts touching him. I keep replaying a specific part that comes right after, when Patrick leans in to turn the night lamp off, and Tom tries to get his mouth on him, thinking he's going to kiss him. Patrick gets on his knees for Tom, and the rest is history. No, we're gonna talk about all that happens later. I like the jump from that scene to Marion reading about it 40 years later. I think this must have been very painful to know that your husband's desire was going elsewhere, even though deep down she knew, of course. And then we jump from young Patrick to old Patrick looking out the window, possibly thinking about that very moment. It hurts when Patrick talks about being alone, and then we see the reality of trying to be with someone of the same sex in those times, when the police almost arrest him. But even though his life has been painful in that matter, he's still looking for love. He is open to human connection. The movie embraces that love is scary. So when he finds Tom on his doorstep, he invites him. After a heated confrontation, Patrick comforts Tom, and a gentle touch is all it takes for Tom to give in. The sex scene unfolding is very delicate yet very hungry. A nice mix of cautiousness and excitement. I like the details, the ruffled hair, the bodies in the mirror. Similarly, I like the discarded clothes on the floor when they fuck on the couch and the angle of the camera when they do that. Moving on to discussing Marion and Tom's relationship, I feel they tend to have a gap in the communication, like there's always something they haven't told each other. We can see them struggling to spend time together. Marion even calls out Tom on that after the quick date in a bar. She points out that they never do things that normal couples usually do. She can tell there is something wrong. He takes her to Patrick's apartment, which, if you think about it, it's quite weird. I think Tom feels comfortable there, and maybe it's easier to be with Marion while being in his lover's space. Tom talks about marriage being a big step, but if he really wanted to get married with Marion, he would have been excited, wouldn't he? In reality, this is something he feels he has to do in order to fit in. Marion experiences and discovers little things here and there about Tom and Patrick's relationship that normally would have been clear signs of the romantic involvement. However, because the characters are the victims of the times they live in, it has never been on her mind in the early days, and that's why she ignored so many signs. I will point out here that as much as they all hurt each other, their friendship was very real. Their love for each other was very real. This trio's connection is not black and white. Second part of the movie focuses on the heartbreaking part of the story. No more bliss. Tom asks Patrick if he can share him, and because Patrick loves him and sees his younger self in Tom, and wants to make his experience of exploring his sexuality easier, he agrees. The happy couple gets married, Patrick gives a speech, and everything goes as Tom wanted. He gets to have both of them at the same time. The hard part comes when they have to consummate their marriage. He tries avoiding having sex with her, and she has to guide him towards her. She probably thinks he's just nervous. And she's not wrong, but for different reasons than she would imagine. It's very quick, far from pleasurable, like a job he was forced to do. Patrick gets invited to their post-wedding days, much to Marion's surprise. She didn't know just how much he would be involved in their marriage. Tom loses his temper during dinner. Seems like there is much he hasn't talked about with Marion. She also sets a boundary with Patrick. Her and Tom are married now. Some things ought to be discussed only by them. Later on, however, she catches them being close and touchy, and she finally sees what she felt was true deep down. Marion hates how Tom pretends nothing happened. Her blood is boiling. She takes him to the bedroom, hoping he'll show her he loves her, desires her. Unfortunately, none of that happens. We move on to Patrick, feeling Tom slipping away from him now that he has a life with Marion. He proposes a trip to Venice, justifying it to Tom when he's having doubts. What I don't like is Tom leaving Patrick to share the news with her. I'm sure it infuriated her more than it would have if he told her. It was Patrick once more putting her in a very uncomfortable position. She was kept out of the loop. He announced the trip like a done deal, like she had no say in it. Eventually, she acknowledges that Patrick is homosexual. In other words, of course, somehow she completely misses that so is her husband. She thinks he's just oblivious to that. Tom argues that to be gay, you have to look a certain way, which of course Patrick doesn't. The trip to Venice is very special to me because I've been there after I read the book and watched the movie. I walked the paths they did. I went to the church, which would only mean something to you if you're familiar with the book. They're so happy there. They can be more open with their love, and it's like a breath of fresh air. Their mistake was sending Marion a card. It sets her off. That's when she talks about wanting to change Tom. She believes it's mostly Patrick's fault he is the way he is. The most painful scene comes not long after, Patrick getting arrested. He knows he's done for. And the way his and Tom's eyes meet for the last time, just heartbreaking. Tom is understandably panicked. He is scared both for Patrick and himself. He runs to Marion, and that's when she finally finds out the truth. What she doesn't say is that she was the one to report Patrick. Marion goes to court to fix the consequences of her action. However, because of Patrick's diary, it will be impossible for him to avoid prison. It was hard hearing the diary being read as a confirmation of accusations Patrick was facing. Later, we see Marion asking Tom if he loves Patrick, and that's when he responds with, "I love you," which is not an answer to the question. We all know that he loved him very much, and Marion speaks up on that when they're both retired. I appreciate how scenes jump from early days to how their lives look like 40 years later, or the quick changes from young characters to old ones. It's a nice touch from the director. Talking about the 90s, in theory, they have the same characters 40 years apart. But in reality, they are different people. Tom is frozen in time. He had to live with heartbreak for 40 years. Marion is no longer her naive self, and Patrick is now fully dependent on others. Tom is very stubborn regarding Patrick and his presence in his home, cold even. I think it's because he had to live with the pain of losing him for so many years that now it's easier to ignore his existence, maybe even pretend he never existed at all. He acts like Patrick has become a problem in his life with Marion once more, even though the life they have been sharing is lacking desire and passion. Marion points out they never properly discussed the situation, so now Marion takes her life into her own hands and speaks up on how lonely she's been. They finally have an honest conversation about what they did to each other. She calls out Tom for lying to her, and she admits to reporting Patrick. She feels guilty about that. Tom admits to wanting Patrick and being deceitful. However, he doesn't want her to leave. Tom is understandably afraid. All he knows is living with Marion, even though they had separate lives anyway. He begs her to stay, but she has already made up her mind. She points out that they don't make each other happy, and he is not alone. He finally goes to Patrick and comforts him. I like the quick change to young Tom in that scene. I like the deep breath Marion takes at the end. 3 of them can finally breathe. I'm glad Marion read Patrick's diary. That gave her a chance to see the side of the story Tom never told her, and perhaps gave her the courage to move on with her life. She was able to understand just how much they meant to each other, and make a decision to remove herself from their lives and find a life for herself. She decided to give them the time they had lost, because the characters that we see are not at the end of their lives, but with life still to live. And finally, not be the victims of the society. They can create their own future. I also want to add that my heart broke for Tom in the 90s when he saw 2 men being openly in love with each other, and he cried for the love he lost years back. I'm glad he finally gets to have a life with Patrick. Thank you all for listening. Hope you enjoyed the show as much as I did, and had fun remembering what happened following this episode.
I will be back in a few weeks. See you then. Bye bye.